Thanks, everybody. Hi. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming out on a Wednesday. Everyone that I've spoken to is just like, I'm crazy, I'm frenetic. I think we can all relate. So getting out here, being part of this little community that we're starting or have started, it's pretty cool. It's nice to see. So today I'm going to be talking about all the buzzwords, as Charles kind of buried the lead to. And I guess just to kind of give everyone the gist of it, we're talking about automation, enterprise IT automation, and AI. And the way I see it is that these are two business accelerants that really have the potential to deliver insane amounts of velocity. Obviously, AI kind of being emergent, automation being something that I think we're all doing part and parcel. And the marriage of the two is something that I think combined could leverage incredible amounts of benefit and maybe make us all a bit less frenetic and allow us to scale a bit easier. But just a quick disclaimer. So I think the key important part that I want everyone to take away is that we are going to be using generative AI at the end of this whole spiel. And I'm going to try and fast forward to that as quickly as possible because I think that's what everyone came for. But that means that the demo is going to be subject to potentially some variance and some level of hallucination, mostly my own because I haven't slept in a few days. So if I start speaking not English, just someone throw something at me. But anyway, this is the second time I'm doing a demo where Gen AI is involved. So apparently I'm just a masochist, but we're going to have some fun. The other thing that I think is a bit neat in the spirit of the whole theme of AI is that all the images in the presentation, other than the obvious screen caps of mine and the container images, have been produced by AI. And if you look real closely, sometimes the text is a bit light. I actually included the prompts that I used to generate them in each image. But anyway, let's have some fun. I would say let's make it conversational, but we'll chat at the end over some beers if it works. Otherwise, some shots. But cool, guys. I think just to step back before we get really into the technical weeds, I want to talk about the things that hamper enterprises when adopting or scaling automation, specifically IT automation. There are myriad types of automation. I'm talking specifically about IT automation. The things that get in the way of IT automation have a common effect in that they stifle innovation, they reduce efficiency, and slow business velocity. So if you think about all the things that automation actually lends itself to businesses when adopting it, when leveraging it properly, not being able to do that at scale consistently means you're kind of losing out on all of those business advantages. So we're going to talk a little bit about the common pitfalls and things that get in the way. And I'm also going to talk about 3 steps that you can leverage to mitigate the common hurdles when starting, as in we're getting kind of kick-started on our approach, or scaling, as in we're somewhere in the middle, we're somewhere at the end of our automation journey. But wherever you are, if you find that you are slowing down, getting stuck, we're going to talk about some of the ways you can potentially circumnavigate those. And funny enough, none of that's technical. We'll get into what it is. But before we do that, I do want to get to know you guys a little bit, although I think I know most of you. But because we're going to be doing a live coding session together, which can get very intimate and intricate and even heated, kind of, if you've ever been in an XP mob, it can get irate sometimes. In fact, guys, you know what? Let's not even do this. Just grab some beers. I'm kidding. We'll do it. But I feel like let's get to know each other when we do our pair programming session for the second time. We're going to be one team, and if we fail, we'll fail together, and if we succeed, well, it's my name on the commit log. But I have 2 quick questions, just kind of to everyone broadly. The first is, how many of you would say your company is using IT automation extensively and effectively to the point where it's integrated into all manner of IT operations? Raise hands. All right, thank you, guys. Second and last question, how many of you feel you have well-defined strategic deliverables that relate to your IT automation initiatives? Show of hands. Okay, Thank you, guys. Thanks, guys. Salespeople? See you didn't raise those hands? Joking. Okay. So let's get into those pitfalls that I was talking about, the automation agonies or the adversities arresting automation awesomeness. That's what I call them. No, I don't. No one calls them that. But at the organizational level, automating at scale requires a top-down strategy that includes investments in time, technology, and people. Stop me if you've heard that before. At the individual level, and this really resonates with me, automation happens when a person encounters a problem they never want to have to solve twice. So, if you're technical, if you're an engineer in the room, that should resonate in some ways. Recently I heard, developers, and let's call automationeers and developers a synonymous thing, are lazy but lazy in the right way, which I thought was quite clever. In my experience, there are 3 major stumbling blocks to successfully adopting automation as the sole means of driving IT operations. There are a myriad of other stumbling blocks. I'm just talking about the 3 major ones. The first is not having a well-defined starting point. So if you're from a moderately sized enterprise, you'll know the giant, massive complexity that you're running on top of, right? Figuring out where to start automating away complexity can feel like you're trying to repaint the Great Wall of China with a toothbrush. And that was the best analogy I could find, or could think of. The other point that can really inhibit driving automation, successfully adopting it, is, if you recall, I just said automating successfully requires an investment in time, technology, and people. Well, if you're kickstarting an automation initiative, but you don't have alignment or buy-in at the right levels, that doesn't necessarily mean you won't paint some portion of the Great Wall of China with your toothbrush, but you'll probably never finish. And it's hard enough as it is, right? And you'll probably have sections in different colors with different brush strokes from multiple types of toothbrushes. So I think I'm murdering this analogy, but basically I'm saying you won't have a consistent approach to automation that's adopted organization-wide, and your organization can generally only operate as fast as its slowest component parts. So that sounds complicated, but if you think about it like this, even if you're the fastest part of a single donkey cart, you're still traveling at the speed of donkey, okay? And what that means is, in your domain, in your team, or in your business unit, you might have the mandate to be autonomous and build out whatever automation you want, select whatever tooling you want, and whatever governance frameworks you want within your BU. If it's not something pervasive and strategic and enabled at the right level, the second you need to externalize what you're doing and interact with other parts of your organization, you're going to be doing whatever they're doing or going at the speed they're doing. So making it pervasive, consistent, and standardized is kind of critical so that everyone's running at the same speed. The last thing is really cultural, and I mean, culture is always a massive part of everything, but if your company has been in business for any moderate amount of time and reached any kind of moderate amount of scale, you will accrue legacy, whether it's legacy technology or the process that surround the technology, and this is the function of how we are and, chaos theory. As the saying goes, fresh code today, tech debt tomorrow. And if it's my code, it's tech debt today as well. But if you apply this mantra to organizations over time, it means that the potential for legacy processes and legacy thinking exists to become the status quo in your organization. I always did it this way, and that's why this is how I'm doing it. We run on COBOL, and I manually type a command into a terminal. When you start introducing potentially disruptive yet hyper-efficient, super slick, scalable, and innovative new ways of delivering, operationalizing, and scaling IT using automation and AI, which is going to be a lot more recent, you may encounter that pushback from the status quo, and that will 9 times out of 10 be something that will be cultural, less technological. So, how do we circumnavigate, mitigate those 3 major hurdles to adopting and scaling automation within your organization and pretty much across your organization? So each of these points is really there to counteract those three former points. And if you think about not knowing where to start or where to, how to begin painting that Great Wall of China with your toothbrush, the answer is you start small and you iterate. So I've seen and we've used this exercise when helping customers to bootstrap and kick off automation initiatives, or even just help gain some more traction to existing automation projects. And you can just even do it as a thought exercise, but firstly, within your domain, ask each team to establish a list of tasks they do repeatedly. If they can't remember, you can go to your ticketing system, your change management system, get them to go and do a bit of a review. Have them categorize those tasks in terms of the average time they spend doing each task and the level of complexity required to complete the task. So effectively, there's two metrics that they assign to each repetitive task. When we talk about the low-hanging fruit are the tasks that return the highest amount of time saved to the lowest technical barrier to automate away. So the output of this exercise is an automation backlog prioritized to yield the greatest return on time saved with the lowest complexity to automate. Effectively, the best place to start automating away toil. Thinking about a product mindset, building automation involves writing automation code and releasing it ultimately into your production environment. That's where the value is, right? It's not keeping it in dev, it's actually rolling it out and using it, having it adopted and standardized upon, and then pretty much closing out all other ways to do that task, creating a singular conduit to do it. Having a product development mindset when building automation means that automation objectives should be aligned to business value, and the process itself should be scalable and consistent. So what we're really actually saying is you should really kind of leverage an agile-esque way of delivering and iterating and evolving automation within your organization, regardless of where it's being implemented. So some things to consider there. And obviously this is idealized. We're all different orgs doing different things. But if you can have a designated automation product owner to manage and liaise between business and the technical teams doing the automation, kind of represent and manage that prioritization. Have regular scheduled iteration planning sessions with your automation developers and automation teams to groom that board, to make sure that you're prioritizing down the right things, to keep that low-hanging fruit, potentially pivoting into some less low-hanging fruit, but with high-value targets, right? The things that are really going to accelerate your business from an automation perspective. Stand-ups, sprint demos, showing stakeholder progress, kind of all the typical ceremonies you would have within a traditional software development product team will go a long ways to introducing maturity when you're delivering IT automation. Standardizing on automation tooling, and I can tell you about some of the tooling that I'd recommend you guys use, really will enable that modularity and reuse, which is super important. A lot of, the whole point of automation is really reuse. And then evolving and expanding on that automation capability as though it were a product, and you're adding new features and capabilities to it to delight your customers. Often you are the customer because it's your infra, but potentially the customer is someone else. So having that product mindset will definitely enable a lot of maturity and kind of set you up on the right incremental approach to evolving your automation capability. When we think about that stakeholder alignment and not having the right buy-in, having clear objectives really clarifies to the business stakeholders what your intent is. So if we're honest, businesses aren't in business to automate IT. I wish they were, my life would be so much easier. But, businesses are in businesses to deliver the services that they're in business for. Understanding and making sure you're aligned and creating clarity on the investment your organization is going to make and the benefits they're set to achieve when adopting and making that time, technology, and people investment into automation is key to securing the right level of buy-in at the stakeholder level. Whoever your stakeholders might be in your org, it's very, very important that you manage expectations, explain it's iterative. No one just starts and says, cool, I've saved us, $1 million rands because I've automated away something. You're going to evolve. It's going to take time. It's going to be a journey. You're going to have to convince people to buy in. You're going to have to change processes. And having that clarity all the way up to an executive level can really mean wonders as you're going on that journey. If all else fails, you can cite the IDC consumer report that found organizations which adopted automation benefited from a 667% 5-year return on investment. And those were specifically customers who adopted Ansible automation platform, just saying. But can always use that tidbit. Lastly, on the cultural side, it's my experience that IT teams generally want to automate away toil. It's kind of rare that you're in the technology space and not kind of keen or curious or excited to do things better, to do things faster. So it's often not the case that there's just a big cultural divide. What I've seen and kind of commonly found to be the situation is teams often just do not have enough slack in the system to enable, whether it's self-enable, go on training, understand how to build out automation, what the ecosystem is, what the tooling is available to them, how to actually implement it within their domain of expertise. Your typical database administrator doesn't really know about or doesn't necessarily get exposed to automation technology. So that's the first side. And the second side is often these, your IT ops teams, if that's what we're talking about, but you could scale it out to other domains, are generally so encumbered, the day-to-day things they need to get done with changes, with BAU work, that they don't actually have time to build out and write automation code and implement it. So even if they were completely enabled and could execute tomorrow, they don't have the slack in the system to even really start. The book Team Topologies, I think it was Matthew Skelton, has this notion of an enabling team, which is really kind of more aligned to how you get software development velocity. But if we can extrapolate that to IT automation, consider an automation feature team within your existing IT, I&O operations team. Splitting away, giving them the space, the enablement, they'll be subject matter experts within their domains, but really making their core focus automation. Your focus is to automate away the toil of your team. And you can build a cross-functional team around this. So you could bring in your storage, your SAN guys, and your DBAs, and your network people, and your security people, and your integration people, your Linux guys, your virtualization team, your cloud team, if they're not automating already. Create a cross-functional ninja automation squad. The power to doing that, even though it is an upfront investment and you're diverting capacity away from the existing teams who will always be under stress and toil, but will never be able to get on top of it because they simply can't find the time to automate, is as that ninja automation cross-functional enabling team gains traction, starts understanding that backlog, starts to get populated, things move across the board, and automation actually gets implemented and leveraged, more and more of those more traditional IT ops teams can then move into your Ninja automation team until it becomes the de facto way of delivering IT operations. We're an automation shop. Nothing happens unless it's being written in code and driven through, an automation workflow. So it's a slow approach, but I think pretty much everyone here is from a large organization. It's a big ship to turn. It's a big switch in the way things get done. So that's a bit of the softer stuff. How do we make automation pervasive? We've talked about the potential barriers that could block and inhibit and impede adopting automation or bootstrapping an automation initiative within your organization. Let's start talking about how we can catalyze and build an acceleration around, ironically, automation so that your automation initiative can benefit from velocity, consistency, security, scale, and efficiency. All the things that automation, ironically, purports to deliver. How do we actually reduce that time to value that business wants? They say, I can see the investment, but there's a long tail to actually get that return on investment. Even if it's a 5-year, 667% return, I'll take that. But how do we actually potentially start to accelerate and enable those ninja squads to move quickly, to learn fast, and to benefit from a mature ecosystem? And I guess for the technologists in the crowd, we're going to start talking tech, and it's going to be tech from here on out, for the most part. So first on the agenda, Ansible Lightspeed. And this is the AI side of the entire discussion. If you guys believe the techno-optimists, so if anyone's read the full Mark Andreessen techno-optimist manifesto, well done. But pretty much everything we do, according to the techno-optimists and the AI optimists, over the near to distant future, will be augmented by some form of AI co-pilot, right? And I don't know if I'm allowed to say co-pilot with Reddit in the room, but in effect, that means that it's going to be pervasive and just embedded in our day-to-day lives and, of course, what we do for a living. What Reddit and IBM have built with Ansible Lightspeed is effectively a first-to-market generative AI trained on a corpus of best practice-aligned Ansible code that is hyper-specific to generating high-quality output based on natural language prompting. So we've all kind of probably played with ChatGPT. ChatGPT, big model, broad model, huge amounts of use cases, but will be prone to obviously variance as you kind of push the bounds. What Lightspeed is set up to do is really a singular thing. It's designed and modeled to be really good at producing Ansible code. It's also capable of multitask generation. So that's generating chained Ansible tasks based on a single natural language prompt, which I'm hoping to demonstrate with some success a bit later. And all of this integrates directly with your IDE. So if you're an automation developer or someone that's kind of starting that, you're not leaving your IDE. It's you know, if the time to value for a developer or an automation developer, that, you know, same kind of flip of the coin, is how much time they stay in their IDE and how many commits they make. It's the same thing. You never have to leave. Something that's really astounding that I actually didn't know until I started building and kind of getting really stuck in the weeds is that Lightspeed is capable of content source matching. So this is kind of that provenance around, I have a model that's producing output, but I can't marry the two. It can't tell me where the sources are. With Lightspeed, you can actually get the three most probable sources that the model was trained on in your IDE, so you can see the most likely licensing and the attribution, which aligns to kind of the Ansible community and obviously Red Hat's notion of transparency. But yeah, it's super interesting that that's kind of built into the model, and I believe it's a fact of how specialized it is. Every other kind of large language model cannot reduce down to what the likely source of the output it's generated was. So pretty interesting. So with Lightspeed, you can kind of think about it enabling two of the most synergistic accelerants for business: automation, which is something that I think we've all got our heads around to lesser and greater degrees, and there's all sorts of IT automation out there. If we think about DevSecOps, infrastructure automation, and varying degrees of other automation, and AI, and obviously in the Lightspeed sense, it's specifically generative AI. And what does that really enable your business to do? Well, we spoke about the barrier to entry and how we scale and make automation pervasive, common, and easy to adopt and leverage. Lightspeed makes it really easy for automators of all skill levels, even those that have never written a line of Ansible or never even thought about automation, to build well-composed Ansible code that they can rapidly integrate and get deployed into their production environment. So it makes an automator out of any SME in your business to varying degrees. Secondly, it means that existing teams that are seasoned in Ansible, Ansible automation and writing Ansible code can move even faster by integrating Lightspeed, which is going to provide them with best practice outputs and really allow them to only have to think about the bespoke pieces that they need to change that Lightspeed's giving them, getting that integrated. So existing Ansible automators get even faster. I think the real power and business benefit and value is if you've never written a line of code, you can probably roll some pretty good Ansible with Lightspeed, which I think is a bit of a game changer for a lot of organizations. So if we think about this just in terms of the yields you get from a business velocity perspective, what we're really doing is we're talking about the marriage of AI and automation, which is kind of a double whammy. And what you've got with Ansible Lightspeed is effectively that. I'm using AI to help me write automation. Any two of those things independently could catalyze and be big levers for a business to pull. Combined, it's kind of like rocket fuel for your organization. Now, see, the screen's a bit wonky, but so we talked about the AI piece. Now we need to talk about the ecosystem. And to make a kind of lofty and highfalutin statement, automation really transcends tooling, which is lofty and highfalutin. If you've ever been in a position where you've written automation code that's gone out into production, that's potentially deployed multiple times in production, that's allowed an individual in that organization or potentially entire teams to not have to be up late doing something, running a change, potentially getting more rest or spending more time with their family, automation starts to become a lot more meaningful than just writing automation code. It becomes something that you want to see adopted pervasively across your organization and actually across the world. Who doesn't want a faster, more efficient, cheaper world to live in where things are automated? This kind of gets into the part where we start talking about how to actually scale automation within your organization. Can't really exist in isolation because you're going to end up with a fractionally painted Great Wall of China and some other teams start on the other side and the colors don't match, right? Really scaling an automation initiative across a large organization means you got to think about governance, standards, scaling, and security. And that's really the differentiator that you get with Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform. It's the ability to build out a centralized, scalable platform that becomes the conduit or the on-ramp to deliver automation across heterogeneous IT environments, IT landscapes. So whether you are a developer that needs to release an artifact into production, a network engineer that needs to make a change on a switch, a SAN engineer that needs to provision a LAN, a security engineer that needs to close a firewall port, and on and on and on. What you want is to have a singular way of delivering all of that through automation. I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty around the core components shortly, and obviously we're going to see a bit in the technical demo, but I'm just going to give a high-level overview of the full ecosystem within automation platform. Some of it we're not going to see today, but they'll definitely be around too when we get really stuck into the weeds with event-driven automation, which I think is going to be an absolute bit flip in how we normally think about automation. But to start with, we've got a multi-tenant automation control plane, and that's automation controller. And we'll get into that a little bit more. We've got content federation, curation, and publication automation hub, or private automation hub. So how do I actually get reuse from an ecosystem of existing modules, playbooks, content out there? How do I bring that into my organization in a safe, trustable way that's I'm verifying the lineage and ensuring the supply chain is solid? An overlay networking mechanism that allows me to deliver automation where I need to in automation mesh. So if I've got an edge use case, how do I go from my automation control plane and deliver the same automation or different bespoke automation all the way down to the edge or into cloud or whatever your use case might be? The ability to invoke automation based off organizational events, which is the event-driven automation controller, as we spoke about, and then the developer enablement tooling. And I'll go into the weeds about what the dev experience is, from an Ansible perspective and how it's evolved. If anyone here has ever, rolled a playbook, it's moved so far from even when I really last got massively stuck into delivering a big automation project. You've got composable automation runtimes in execution environments. These are all containerized images that contain the barest minimum surface area of what your automation, what your playbook needs to do. And I'll show a bit of the execution environment shortly. You've got environment builders that actually will modularize and build those execution environments and push them out to your automation hubs where they need to go. You've got content creation and content management within a client tool called Ansible Navigator, which is going to be kind of the next step in the evolution from a tooling perspective. And then you've got a very powerful language server and lincing mechanism that runs inside of your IDE. And then, of course, last, I mentioned the content collections. This is effectively having that curated list of existing Ansible content provisioned by Red Hat, made available by various vendors, kind of everyone from AWS to F5 to all the common things that are probably running in your data centers, that are either certified, which means you're going to get some level of vendor support or Red Hat support, or validated, which means they're pretty good to go, or in the community space. And of course, you can get to decide what your appetite is to use community, to certified, to validated content, and you can build a bit of a firewall around what you're willing to let into your organization and let your automation developers use using Private Automation Hub. So just getting a little bit behind the curtain so that we are, or that everyone's got kind of enough context as to when we get in the demo, how it all fits together, what the pieces mean, and the amount of blood, sweat, and toil that actually went into building what's going to be like a 10-minute demo. But it's also a nice opportunity to kind of nerd out, which I'm sure a lot of people here appreciate. So just going to run you guys through how it all fits together, and it's also probably route some of those automation platform components into kind of, let's say, the objective space. But first, the demo infrastructure. I present our high-density scale-out compute lab. 3 Intel NUCs of raw compute power to deliver ML mastery. Thank you, Charles. And then, of course, our massively high-speed 1 gig Ethernet switch. I had an industrial-grade cooling system up above, which I've neglected to bring, so if everything falls over due to overheating, the aircon's pretty good, so I think we'll be fine. And then, of course, in South Africa, if you don't have a dedicated inverter, so we got solid redundant power. So we're looking pretty good. It did fall over once when my inverter ran out of juice, and I had to rebuild vSAN on the fly, and it was horrible. It was a horrible Sunday. It was this last Sunday. I'm looking tired, that's why. On top of all of that, we have an orchestration platform. So Ansible automation platform can run, native on Rail. We, kind of being a cloud-native first company, if it can run on OpenShift, Kubernetes, and benefit from cloud-native orchestration, that's where we're going. So what you're seeing is actually a screenshot of the topology view in OpenShift, and I can just show you guys how it all looks. I think the really cool, powerful things here are that every component that you see, Automation Hub, Automation Controller, and Event-Driven Automation, are all defined by these manifests here. Those are YAML files, textual things that you can apply declaratively into your cluster that will stand up the same automation platform wherever it needs to be. Now, there is persistence in the stack. There's some Postgres and some various other things. But the nice thing is everything is actually driven through controllers. So for each of your automation hub or automation platform components, there is an operator that runs in OpenShift that's actually written by using the Ansible operator SDK, which I think is kind of really cool and a bit of a kind of a inception, an Ansible inception, if you would. But it also means that we can create a little backup pod through the controller, through the operator, and it'll just back up all your state. So huge amounts of power and very quick time to live. To stand this up is not huge amounts of toil. The other powerful thing when running on a platform like OpenShift is we can benefit from the scale of execution that OpenShift gives us. So every time I run a task through Ansible controller, it actually runs as a pod in my OpenShift cluster, which means that I can run 40, 50 tasks, and as long as my cluster is sized correctly or can auto-scale to accommodate that, I will just benefit from that OpenShift underneath the Kubernetes type linear scale that I get. So kind of very cool way of platforming a whole bunch of components. I'm going to run real quick because I think it's kind of interesting. Super fast. Through standing up Lightspeed. So you guys are going to have to watch this quickly because it's going to go quick. First, you need an IBM Cloud account, and you take out a Watson Code Assistant thing, and their tokens. I don't know about that, but it's our COO's credit card. You link that to your Red Hat Lightspeed portal, so you're going to get an API key for your Watson Code Assistant, and you'll get a model ID. You plug that straight in. You install the Ansible VS Code extension, which also gives you linting and a bunch of other things, but also is where the Lightspeed plugin exists. I definitely recommend, it's Ansible, there's a lot of Python underneath it, create a virtual env, and install the basic requirements, which are those. Those are all the kind of DevX pieces, and we're going to talk about them a little bit. So now you've got a virtual environment, you've got the extension installed in your IDE, you've created an IBM Watson account, and you've linked it to your Red Hat Lightspeed account. Okay. You tick those 2 boxes, and Lightspeed's enabled, right? No. I was quite confused for a while when putting this together. You do sign in through SSO with your Reddit accounts from your IDE in, so you've signed in. Make sure that when you start writing YAML, your language server is set to use Ansible. So I had another YAML plugin, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why Lightspeed wasn't just filling out all the code for me. But that was why. So make sure that your language mode is set to Ansible, and you can start the AI singularity, which is what we're about to do, and it'll be all our fault. Cool. So we're going to go into the components that you're going to see shortly, and I'm just going to have to move my mouse here. And I'm going to go quickly because time, but effectively, as I was talking about Private Automation Hub, so there's a notion of Automation Hub, which is, Red Hat's centralized SaaS Automation Hub offering, effectively the same thing you get in data center when you build out Private Automation Hub. You actually link the two together. It allows you to curate the automation content, the Ansible collections that you want to bring into your organization. So what you're seeing here is I've got 3 repositories that I've allowed through the Red Hat certified content, which means that I actually get vendor support on that content. If I bring it into my own playbooks and use it and something breaks, I can log a bug request and I get vendor support either from Red Hat or the partner. The validated content, which is like a layer or 2 above the community, it's kind of tried true, typically vendor provided as well, and then community, which is Ansible Galaxy, which is a big ecosystem. Now, I think the interesting thing is I'm never going to say don't use what's out there in the community, but obviously know what your risk exposure is and make sure that when you bring something in, you're considering, well, if it doesn't work for me, if it starts breaking in production, I might need help, or I need to just make sure I've got that capability in my team. And then you can see below, those are the collections that get surfaced, almost like a self-service catalog of, these are all the automation components you can start using readily and available with documentation and Automation Hub to help your automation developers get going. You can also curate, as I mentioned, what content you want to bring in, which modules you want to allow. So if you have, say, F5 and Amazon and a few other pieces in your organization, Kubernetes in this example, you can limit the content you want to bring in based on a YAML requirements file, and you can set that up per repository. So you can get very prescriptive about what you want to allow your automation developers to use and potentially create a process that allows them to request if they want more stuff. This is also, Private Automation Hub is also where you expose your execution environments. As I said, these are the small modular runtimes where you bake just the minimal pieces that your automation code, your Ansible automation code needs to run. This is an image, effectively. It's a container image. And the way you publish it through is by you pulling your container image registry into Private Automation Hub, setting up some tagging rules. So let's say you want to version control your execution images and write some docs as to what's inside of them and how you use them. The intention here is to have these things as small, as minimal as possible, leanest surface area, because at the end of the day, when you execute a task within controller, it's actually pulling that image to an OpenShift node and running the playbook. So the smaller and leaner you can get it, the faster the turnaround time for your automation. Talk about the developer integration shortly. Automation controller, as I mentioned, this is a control plane that allows you to orchestrate, manage, scale, and execute Ansible automation. So if you've ever run an Ansible playbook through the client, this is like everything you've ever wanted, from a UI. Firstly, it allows you can visualize all the jobs that you have running, where things are failing, and as your organization gets busier, that dashboard kind of starts to blow up. You can see where inventory is synchronizing or not synchronizing, and manage and resolve things. There's a notion of projects. So projects are effectively all the automation code you've written, typically residing in your source code manager or Git. As you can see, I've got a single lab project here that's coming from an upstream Git repository in GitHub, but it could be from another source. You can source projects from things like Red Hat Insights if you want to leverage like Red Hat Insights immediately through things like Ansible to drive automation. The other powerful thing is you've got very strong tiered role-based access control in Automation Controller. It's designed to be multi-tenant. And you can define and control things at the org level. So as you can see at the bottom here, I've got an LSD open organization. I've defined the execution environments that LSD open is allowed to use. So I can limit and reduce what is available at the org level, at the team level, and down to the user level. Again, as I said, if you've ever run an Ansible playbook from the CLI and had to deal with static inventory and INI or YAML inventory files, it can become tedious, it can become laborious, updating it becomes almost impossible. Within Automation Controller, you've got a notion of both static and dynamic inventory, and you can even build your own custom inventory plugins. So we actually had to do that once for a customer who was using, I think it was BMC Atrium as their CMDB, and we had to build a little inventory plugin in Python that would go and pull down all of their thousands of hosts through their CMDB. So you've got a lot of flexibility as to how you populate your inventory. And typically in this world, everything is dynamic. So we're actually using in the demo 2 sets of inventory. One is static that I've just defined in my project, which is literally just a control node that I use to talk to vCenter that actually stands up the fleet per se of VMs that we're going to be seeing shortly. And then I've got a dynamic inventory setup that actually plugs into vCenter, but this could be AWS, Azure, or any other kind of substrate. There's a myriad of pre-existing supported inventory providers that you can hook into. And I've set up a whole bunch of source variables, including a filter on specific tags. So in this example, I only want to bring in the virtual machines that consist of my lab automation fleet as per the tag, which means that a group will be created once it's scanned by vCenter of its inventory of only those hosts. And I do a bit of an inception thing here where I build the VMs using my static inventory, apply those tags, sync that inventory dynamically, and then run a workflow that actually now starts talking to the dynamic inventory, which is kind of a common pattern, but it's still pretty neat to see in action. Credential management and making sure that you're able to allocate the right credentials to the jobs you're automating across. And of course, this is something that's part and parcel to automation. You're talking to databases, you're talking to Ansible Vault potentially, you're talking to other password managers, you're talking to any number of things that require privileged credential management, and being able to pass that to your Ansible Playbook securely is where the credential management piece comes in. It's also where you integrate Automation Hub with your Ansible controller. So what that actually allows is you're telling Ansible controller, this is where you fetch content. You do not speak to anything else other than Automation Hub. And that's pretty much done simply by creating a whole bunch of API tokens pointing to your private Automation Hub published content repositories. And I can show what that looks like in practice. I talked about the scale you get from using OpenShift as the substrate to run automation playbooks. You can also scale out multiple automation controllers as distinct instances. You can even create a hop instance where potentially you need to put it behind some kind of strange network. Of course, I'm just showing where I run a job, and you can actually see in OpenShift the pod running and launching the automation playbook. But you get scale at 2 levels. You can have multiple automation controllers, and then of course at the execution level, you can use substrates like Kubernetes or standard substrates to run your tasks and playbooks. And then lastly, you've got the ability to chain multiple job templates into a consistent workflow. And that's what you're seeing here, and that's what you're going to see in the demo, where we start with an approval phase, where we say, before we run this, we need an audit trail. Someone's got to go and make sure that that credit card is being processed with all the right amounts of rigor and confirmation. But then we go through various stages, which each represents their nodes in the workflow. They each represent distinct playbooks, really, at the end of the day, doing distinct things. And you can chain a whole bunch of things into a workflow to produce what is effectively like a workflow pipeline. That could be a fully fledged, deliver all my infrastructure, stand up my app, do the thing. Okay, we're nearly at the demo. And I did want to talk about the developer experience because I think Reddit has put a ton of investments into making the Ansible developer experience, incredibly fluid and kind of easy to do. So the first, which is kind of part of Lightspeed, is the Ansible CodeBot. This was kind of magic when I saw it in practice. You can add a field. As you can see, I've got a little label on my automation repository here that says Ansible CodeBot. And what that invokes is Ansible CodeBot will scan my Git repository, pick up where I may have validation issues or coding issues, things that aren't aligned to best practice. It'll open up a pull request with all the changes to fix the things it's found, and you can just merge that code in. I just merged it in and it just worked. And my code is cleaner, more efficient, better, and benefiting from best practice. So very powerful AI-driven kind of code scanning at the code level. Then we've got Ansible Lint. I will never write Ansible without Ansible Lint again. It's incredible. It not only allows you to see in real time where you're making mistakes so you can correct them before you're running your playbook and having to go through all that crazy error logging, but it also is a bit of a language server that'll tell you, if you can see here, using this specific module, the VMware tag module, it actually has picked up that it's expecting a Boolean variable and I'm giving it the wrong variable type. Even though Ansible is YAML and it's not typed, it's inferring that from what the module's expecting and from what my variable that I'm passing is, that I'm giving it the wrong output. Ansible Navigator, so this is the text user interface for effectively managing all your Ansible development workflows locally on your laptop where you're deving your code. You can see here I'm kind of browsing through the local content that's available to me through Private Automation Hub. So it's read my requirements file and it's looked at where I'm passing the Galaxy information through to, and it's saying these are what's localized for your environment and what you can pull through. Lastly is Ansible Builder. So in this demo, we're going to be using an execution environment, a minified custom LSD open runtime image, which just has the pieces. I'm talking to vCenter in this example, and then I'm doing a few other pieces within a fleet of Red Hat virtual machines. So I've created a custom execution image, and I've used Ansible, the Ansible Builder to build it and push it into a registry where it is then served through Private Automation Hub and delivered into my runtime environment through controller. So not complicated at all. No, I'm kidding. It is actually quite nice and succinct when you put it all together and see it working. When it works. And talking of working, it's time for the demo. So this demo is subtitled "Look, Ma, No Hands." It's the second time I'm letting Gen AI kind of steer, but this is going to do with some even tougher parameters. So I always like to root any technical demo in a bit of a user story to make it kind of, relatable to something that you do in your day-to-day job. So in our user story, business has asked, as they do ask nicely, us to deliver a new AI app to market yesterday. So time frames are tight. When are they not? To ensure the launch of this AI app is successful, we need to build a fleet of VMs to house the app and scale it. We need to implement our organizational security standards across the fleet. We need to deploy and configure the app that they've given us. They've built the app. They're saying, here's the artifact. Deploy it across the fleet and configure it so that it works. And then do it all in 15 minutes and sit back and watch that sweet AI money roll in. So the parameters of this demo, and this is now the demo mob, we're doing some live coding together, is other than uncommenting a block, I'm not going to write a single line of Ansible code. Ansible Lightspeed will be responsible for delivering against the entire demo use case. And whatever happens. We're gonna do this together. Now I have tested some of these prompts ahead of time, purely because otherwise we're gonna be sitting here for a while, because it does take a little time to get the AI to hum exactly the way you want it. The other thing I'm gonna do now is mirror my screen, minimize cat video. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so just to start out, just so there's nothing under the sleeves, I'm going to refresh, and as we can all agree, no apps have been deployed, right? Thank you, lady. All right, so just to kick things off, actually just kill this. Okay, to kick things off, I'm just going to quickly illustrate to everyone those pieces, just so everyone can kind of get a view as to how they all fit together. So here is my cloud native, guys, restarts all the time. Here is my private content hub, and my private automation hub with my repositories, as I was showing you guys. And these are the only repositories that I'm going to be using throughout this demo. Here is our OpenShift substrates upon which our automation platform components are going to run. And now you can see effectively that same view, but if you want to look at what it looks like under the hood, it's all these parts. This is automation platform. And we've got a vSphere lab, as you saw, our scale-out lab. And within that vSphere lab, I've kind of, to save time, already deployed 2 automatons to our fleet, but they've only just been provisioned. We've done none of the day 2 stuff. As part of this, we'll build the 3rd one and carry on with life. Okay, so within our automation controller, we have a whole bunch of templates, including a workflow. So each one of these is effectively those stages that we need to execute to deliver against those business requirements. So we've got to provision the fleet, we've got to secure the fleet, and we've got to configure and deploy our application. And we're going to get stuck into the implementation side of that. So here's our repository. This repository links to our project, and the project is built using whole bunch of inventories. As I showed you guys, these inventories have 2 sources: our control node, which is only when we need to speak to vCenter, and then the fleet, which is our dynamic plugin, dynamic inventory, kind of talking to vSphere and pulling inventory out based on a whole bunch of filters that we've set up. Okay, enough chit chat. Let's get into the implementation side. So the whole premise is this is no hands. AI is going to drive. The only thing I'm going to do is uncomment our last machine from being built. If anyone is interested, we've got quite a nice consistent pattern for modularizing and doing tiered environments within Ansible. We have this notion of environments that we load through a variables file. So you can see I'm using the lab environments, but this could be prod, this could be dev test, and each of those will have these are the distinct variables relevant to this environment. So this is my lab environment. Also got some Ansible Vault secrets that are encrypting my vSphere service account credentials. So let's just let that third machine go. Okay, first change done. Everything from here on out is all automation, baby. So I've got 3 roles. I've got a secure and I've got a configure. So this is provision. If anyone is interested, this is where we actually stand up the base pieces of the fleet. As you can see, everything is variabilized as per good automation practice. And then we're going to create a tag. That tag is what our inventory is going to look for when these machines are provisioned. So let's start with secure. So thankfully, business has given us some mandate to say what they want done to get everything up and running. So first, we're gonna make sure the fleet is secure, and we're gonna ensure that we have runtime protection, because these are all Rail images. That means SC Linux, and we're gonna enable it and set it to enforcing. So that you'll see what I'm using is I'm actually starting the name of a task here. So this is one way to prompt Lightspeed, is to actually give it the name of the task as per this. I press enter, you can see Lightspeed is thinking. It's going to the IBM mothership through Red Hat, which handles all the interchange. And what I get is completion back, and we can just tab to make sure we can read it a bit easier. But this is effectively using the Ansible SD Linux module to make sure that SD Linux across all our fleet will be enabled and enforcing. And you can kind of, through Ansible lint, get a view as to what the module does. So it's actually pulling the docs in real time. The second thing business tells us is we need to have least privileged firewall access across the fleet, which means that we're going to be opening up SSH port 80, which is probably a bit of a foot gun. No one tell business, and 443. And we are going to be delivering this through TLS and HTTPS. Then we're going to disable all other traffic to the public zone, and we're going to reload our firewall. This is an example of a chained prompt that will create chained tasks. So for each of these ampersands, we should get a distinct Ansible task that's going to do this, pretty much incrementally. So open the ports, disable other traffic, so close down everything else, and then reload firewall D. And we wait for it. Nice thing is, if you don't accept the prompt, if you press escape, it actually feeds back to, through Lightspeed to say, this isn't relevant to what's happening, and they actually use that for more inference. So just to kind of run through what this looks like, we now have a firewall D module that's being used, which obviously just interfaces with firewall D wherever it might be. That's going to open up port 22 for SSH access, port 80, and port 443. So it's created a list, and it's just going to iterate through that list to open those ports. Then it's going to disable all the other traffic. So it's going to say anything in the public zone is disabled, and it's going to reload our rules. So that looks pretty solid to me. I don't think I would change any of this. We need to make sure that the latest updates are applied to our fleet before we go live. We do not want to run and then have to come back and patch it at night. So we've simply got, let's apply the latest package updates to Red Hat 9. And you'll see that a lot of the time I'm actually prompting it with very specific cues around the distribution is Red Hat. So think Rail. If you kind of get less specific, you might end up with something that's not exactly what you need. So the more specific you get, I found, the better your chances of success first time around. We've got a linting thing that's saying we shouldn't use latest when we're using the package module. I can kind of you can make an argument for that. Maybe you want to just use security. Let's just go full tilt. And then the last thing we're going to do, and let's just make this bigger. So now we're really going to test the boundaries of, we're going to do this twice, but this is going to be like a multi-chain prompt. We've got to set up a deployment service account, which we're going to use to deploy the application, right? So what this means on the back end in terms of our standardized runtime and policy is we're going to create an admin group with a specific GID. We're going to create a service account user on each of the accounts, and we're going to add an authorized key which is a local file. So you can see here, this is a long prompt. Add the member, add our service account to the admins group, add an authorized key to that user using the local SVC LSD open pub file. If we go and look at this role, we can see, okay, we've got the pub file included, so we've got the authorized key there. So let's let that go. Nine times out of 10, it works 7 times out of 10. All right, let's just accept it so we can read it. So we're creating the group with the right GID, we're creating the user with our desired UID, we're adding the authorized key, and we can see that the user is a member of our group. The last thing we need to do is enable the requisite privilege escalation, which should be pretty straightforward. Let's let Lightspeed just do its thing and give us sudo as privileges, because we're going to be running some privilege commands, right? So excellent. So here we're using line and file. You could say, if you might be a little bit more fluid with Ansible, that there is a sudo as module, which might make it a little bit easier, but we're under the pump from business, as we always are, so let's get to market, right? So we've now kind of rolled through what we need to implement from our security standards and requirements in Ansible. Well, we haven't, Lightspeed really has. Let's get onto the configuration sites, and this is now we actually need to deploy our application across this fleet of VMs. So the first thing we need to do is make sure, because our app is nanosecond sensitive, being AI, and everything, it needs to be within one super hyper nano microsecond of each other, we need to make sure that we've got time synchronization across the board, right? So it's quite simple. Install the Crony package, which is a time server, time synchronization package that's implanted NTPD or NTP, in the NTP client specifically. It's still using NTP under the hood. And it's saying, use our standardized crony.conf Ginger templates and enable the service. So if we were to go look at that, we can see that there is a template for Crony, and it's going to be using time service. So here we've kind of married some of our existing automation organizational standards. Probably don't need to do that, but just to get things rolling quickly, let's just go with the templating side. Let's just make sure the output it gives us is good. And you can see each time I'm saying for it at 9. So each time Lightspeed is coming back with, if the OS family is correct, Red Hat version 9, install the package, create the configuration from the template that we're passing us, and start the service. Next, we need to install our standardized web server. We are an Nginx shop. So we're gonna deploy the Nginx package into Red Hat 9 across our fleets, and we're gonna use our Nginx config template that's gonna set up the web server across the fleets. So if we go have a look at that, we can see we've got some existing scaffold that we need to think about. We've got a certificate and a key that we're probably going to need to think about, but let's get the ball rolling, and let's get the package installed, and let's get the base config in place. Okay, so using the built-in package module, which we've used before, and the built-in template module, and it's even going as far as to set up the right permissions without us really having to worry too much about that. Okay, almost done. The last thing is we have to make sure we're terminating TLS so that we're using encryption. And by the way, we need to make sure that we're not sending clear text keys over the wire. So what we're going to do is another big chain command. Let's see if Lightspeed is up to the task. We're going to copy our certificates to the specific etc PKI TLS private directory, as well as copy the vault encrypted file, which is our TLS key, which is needed by Nginx to terminate TLS. And it's going to go to the TLS private directory, and we're going to set it up. Obviously, we don't want to land it as vault. We're going to set it up as a key, and we're going to lock down the permissions to only allow the user that creates it to read it effectively. So we're going to restrict permissions to the key. They never want to have a TLS key sitting there that's readable by anyone other than the owner. So let's see if Lightspeed gets it right. We've got copy the local file, and the nice thing is you get some really good instructive or descriptive task names that kind of tell you exactly what's happening. And we've got the key being moved across with the permissions being set. The last thing we need to do is deploy our chatbot front end. So let's get the app deployed. We've got a release that we've been given that we need to deploy and roll out, and we're going to drop it in the op directory. So effectively, we're just saying, take the contents of this release and drop it into the directory that our Nginx web server expects it to be served on. So here we go. And it's using the unarchive directly from upstream, which is actually pretty cool. You can just say, extract it directly from the web. We do have some linting issues. Let's just make our Ansible linter happy too. I feel like all I do these days is make robots happy, which is weird. And you can see it's kind of gone a little bit over and above this. Let's just correct those. And Ansible lint is kind of helping us to make sure that things look good. But there we go. It's going to use the unarchive module. So unarchive straight from our GitHub release repository. And then the last thing we need to do is make sure all critical application services, in our case, Nginx, are enabled and started so that our app is reachable. Okay, moment of truth. This is the last little bit that we need to do. The last little bit we're asking of Lightspeed. Don't know what the credit card build looks like, but I've done this maybe once or twice before. So yeah. So now what we need to do is obviously commit this code to our repository. Oops, let's escape that properly. So if we look at that, oh, I already committed it. We've now committed a ton of changes, all of which have been, by and large, except for my big uncomment, have been provided straight from Lightspeed. I mean, all I've done is prompt it, right? They might be pre-formatted prompts, but I haven't had to write a single line of code. What I'm going to quickly do now is just make sure that content is synced. When you configure a repository, you have the option to say, anytime a job is launched that is hanging off of this Git repository, update the code, so just clean out the code base. I'm not doing that purely because this is a demo environment and it takes quite a while between job runs. It can add a little bit of time, and I want to just kind of show you guys as quickly as possible. So I'm just going to do a manual sync. And we get a little notification here from our Autobot saying that there is a job running. A sync job is still a job. And to show you what that looks like, I can actually just go straight from our Slack bots into the job, and we can see, okay, cool. It's syncing from our Git repository, and it's actually inspecting our requirements YAML and looking at the collections that we're allowed to use. And here you can see Autobot telling us, cool, that job completed successfully. Just to show you guys what that actually looks like and means, I mentioned our execution environment. So this is the file that defines the image that we're going to run, and it's pointing to a Galaxy file, which tells Ansible where it can source content. And that's this requirements YAML file. There's also a whole bunch of Python libraries that we're installing, and we can install any other tooling we want. But this is effectively saying we're using these two collections, and you're going to our private automation hub to fetch them. We're going to the Red Hat certified repository for one, so getting supported content, and the other one we're just going to community for. It's a demo. Okay, moment of truth. Time to launch this, and what we're going to do is we're going to launch the entire workflow, which looks like this. And it's going to start with an approval stage, and I can see that our Autobot is saying, get out the credit cards. Someone needs to approve the workflow. So I'm going to say, let's do it. Let's go to markets, just close those, and I've been told, cool, the provision of the fleet is running. Now, what that means is this provisioning task, which is going to build that outstanding, they're all outstanding in my opinion, but that one remaining virtual machine is kicking off. So it's going to probably be the longest part in the chain, and we can actually watch the logs here. I'm just going to jump between them. Sorry, it's a bit frenetic. You can see that provision task. You can see it's picked up. I've got the 2 already, and I've got those tags in place already, but I need a 3rd because you've added another one. So it's pretty idempotent. It's saying, this is what I need to build. And if we jump over to vSphere, we can see that it's actively cloning out the 3rd automaton into our lab vSphere environment. That's going to take hopefully not too long. Getting there. Anyone know any jokes? Over the weekend, I bought a thesaurus, and I have to say it's terrible. In fact, it's so bad, I would say that it's terrible. I'm here on that, folks. At least until this cloning is done. All right. So you can see it's coming up. For those who've never seen Red Hat Boot, this is what it looks like. For those that have, I'm sure you're all bored at this point. So this is going to kick off all the CloudInit post-config things through the vSphere module that we're using, feed it its IP, its networking detail, etc. It takes a little while because what we have told it, if we go to the code, just to show everyone, is where's fleet deploy? Obviously, we want to make sure that everything is coming up on the network before we proceed with the next task. Because if fleet's not on the network, we might as well just stop. So we're saying, wait until your IP address is up. register that, and then we go through and just tag all those instances as they come up. So it shouldn't be too long. Autobot's saying that we're already done with provisioning of the fleet, and we're moving on. We're moving on to updating inventory, and that's the clever part of the workflow, is that what we're actually doing is syncing the inventory once we've finished the deployment. So if we look at that secure job, which is now kicking off, that's going to roll out all that code we've just written. The new code, which is going to start applying the locking down of the firewall, enabling SC Linux, as you can see, locking down the firewall, reloading it, applying the latest patches to each instance, including the new one we've just added in. Anytime today. I don't know what the link like is through the Tryst. Told us good. There we go. So it's just syncing whatever upstream packages need to be synced through. It's adding our sudoers, and we should be done. Excellent. So we're moving on to the last leg, which is the configuration. This is deploying our application, our AI app, that's going to make it rain money. And if we look at that, that's doing all the things we need it to do. It's going to make sure the time is synchronized. It's going to install the web server package in Nginx. It's going to set up the TLS certificate and key. It's going to pull through the release artifact that we need to stand up the little web app. And I believe Autobot's ahead of our UI. And it's funny because these notifications are going directly from Automation Controller to Slack. But if we just say reload outputs, we can see that everything's completed successfully. And Autobot agrees. Good news, everybody. And that means our workflow is complete. And the moment of truth is everything running? So let's let it all go. And our AI app is up. And I think the thing that we just want to illustrate, or I want to illustrate, is that we didn't actually write a single line of Ansible code. We used natural language prompting to build out the automation that we needed to build to get the app up and running. So yeah, that's a wrap, folks. Lightspeed. Next one, EDA. Cool. Man, the last time I prompted it, it kind of gave me something else completely, so whew. Anyway, thanks, guys. Yeah, so it was kind of patterned on, what I think of as a very much more traditional IT. You need to provision infrastructure, you need to build a VM, you need to secure it or apply some standards or some posturing to it, and then you need to roll an application onto it. So it's kind of like the tried and true de facto, this is how IT runs. It's not I need to build a container image and deploy it and scale it to Kubernetes or build out cloud infrastructure. So how that relates to business in this sense is that we kind of implemented all of that using automation, which now gives us the reuse. So we can go and reuse what we've done as a template, as a pattern, and we didn't necessarily need to know how to write Ansible code. It does help because you can kind of infer, okay, that's pretty much what I needed to do. And I think the more you do it, the faster you'll get at tweaking it and changing it. But the implication is we've now created a whole bunch of modularity and reuse that we can use to do the same pattern over and over again. Depending on how you're managing and deploying applications or managing how you build infrastructure, the business benefit here is literally around velocity. It's around speed, it's around consistency, and it's around reuse and reproducibility. So it's all of those things combined. I didn't have to have my VMware team building out VMs by hand, and didn't have to have my security team kind of logging into each one and running a script to apply the security policy, or have to have my application team, then sign in and struggle to figure out where things are and deploy their app. It's all done through automation code. And I think the distinction here is that it's not just done through automation code, it's done through automation code that we didn't write. We used AI to actually build the automation that we needed. So it's that double whammy, it's that accelerator of AI plus automation to really speed things up. Ansible is push-based, but depending on how you're writing and composing your playbooks, you can get it to be fairly idempotent. For example, I can go and delete any one of these VMs now rerun that workflow, and it's going to put it back the way I've wanted it. Now, you do get these kind of weird half-broken scenarios where like maybe it's still holding onto the IP and it's not fully down. And then you could probably write a playbook that counteracts that by scrubbing and purging and saying, I've got to clean up and I've got to redeploy. That kind of forces that kind of, you get to the desired state. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. So OpenShift runs on top of VMware in our lab. We've got, these are actually the OpenShift VMs. It actually hooks into VMware and uses it to kind of scale out and attach storage. So it integrates quite nicely with VMware. You can also deploy it bare metal as well. So we've got kind of the physical layer, which is here. Then we've got the virtual layer, which allows us to build VMs. And then we've got the platform layer, which is OpenShift. Runs inside of VMware. So OpenShift effectively runs as again, a fleet of VMs, of nodes. And the way it actually integrates with VMware, and it can do the same with the likes of AWS or Azure or any kind of substrate that kind of is a virtualization layer, is it can use it to also scale itself in and out programmatically. So when it's under load, it can actually go speak to the vCenter API and say, I want to create more OpenShift virtual machines, and come back in. And it can also talk to the API to say, I need to attach storage to this pod, create a VMDK or a container volume now with the new CSI, and attach it to a pod. So it uses the substrates to both kind of scale itself out and kind of leverage it from a storage perspective. Most of those kind of FANG level scale out companies, they've hit scale points that most enterprises, especially most African enterprises, are only now starting to see. Like Google had to pretty much build out orchestration tooling that to allow it to scale to how it needed to scale. So they started out with that kind of by design. They just couldn't scale the number of engineers to the amounts of services they needed to serve. But 100% that, you're pretty much saying, I've got my blueprints and I can lay out what I need, where I need it, anywhere over the world by my standards, and I can mature and evolve it as well. You absolutely can, and in fact, when you're kind of testing locally, it gives you a nice fast feedback loop. So you can even run, so basically, Ansible Builder behind the hood under the scenes uses Podman, which is kind of that rootless, daemonless OCI client for building containers. You can even launch using Ansible Navigator. You can launch an execution environment on your laptop straight from your IDE that runs your playbook locally, which means you get a fast feedback loop for testing, which is what you want as a developer. The faster you can say, okay, this is broken, I need to fix that. Obviously, you need to think of those synthetic environments, but you can. So this is the playbook, and if I wanted to run it locally, I could do something like this. And there you go, it's running on my laptop. Yeah, and I guess that is a bit of a I guess got the cloud team right here to answer that. But the reality is, when you're starting off cloud native, you can kind of design that in from first principles. So you're really thinking about orchestration, you're thinking about automation, provided you're doing it correctly. You're not clicking through anything, everything's declarative, it's in code and reusable and repeatable. And that is kind of a thing, I think we've all been in that situation, may still exist and be pervasive out there, where you can take multiple weeks to get virtual machine or virtual infrastructure provision, or any infrastructure provision, right? The cloud native born companies are not encumbered by that amount of legacy, which is why they can outpace, disrupt, and be fast, because they're kind of leapfrogging the more traditional ways of driving IT infrastructure, which is why this is kind of important, because that digital native, cloud native startup has the potential to really outpace a much larger, much more capitalized traditional enterprise over time, purely by velocity and innovation. Well, that's kind of and it's a great distinction. It's a couple of weeks to do the engineering, but then you can stand up the entire infrastructure for a trading engine in a day, or you can do it under a day. And you can do it across multiple regions with tweaking a bit of code. So that is the distinction really at the end of the day. Cool.
Okay.
Thanks very much, everybody.